All right, well, so then apparently there is a official Square Enix quarter 2025 financial report that shows a really sharp decline in the 14 year over year after the launch of Dawn Trail. So a year has passed by, obviously, since the release of Dawn Trail, maybe like a little bit more than a year, and there's been like a massive decrease by the MMO's gross sales, which honestly sounds like a lot. And a shareholder says that something must be done for 14 to regain popularity and user base as its important pillar to the game's HT game sales, which also makes like a lot of sense because 14 is a modernized title that's still being worked on through and through by the day. And obviously the game is a massive profit for the company, and so therefore they got to figure out how to put stuff into the game or make decisions and changes in order for the game to profit much more so than it has been in the past year. Now, I think it was also already expected that because of Dawn Trail's release being Dawn Trail, that there was going to be a decline for two reasons. One, it's a new arc, the saga of Realm Reborn to Endwalker has completed, so I've already heard from a lot of people that their intentions were to just retire from Endwalker anyway, just because like the story is done and they just don't have an interest anymore in the game. And then also for other reasons too, and I think the more common folk idea is that the MSQ for Dawn Trail, while the post has been really good so far, the original Dawn Trail MSQ not people's favorite. Which thankfully in that case scenario, they've already discussed the idea of changing up kind of the order of operations with writers and mechanical execution, blah, 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 whatever, which is great. However, I think that this is still at a larger scale than what it's kind of appealed to be. So here's, because I think we've had a lot of communications with the community. I mean, listen, people that I talk to, ask them like, what are they looking for in terms of 14? What do they want out of the game? Like, what's missing? What's good? What's not good? How can it be improved, etc. Blah blah blah, whatever. And we come up with, I think, like 5 or 6 ideas that one they would just like in the game, or it's something that the game would need in order to kind of refuel the fire to whatever that it is. So here's the thing though, I think that the game is sitting at like a rating of like a 8.5 in my personal mindset. Like the game overall, across all expansions, the way how the content's made, the game is great. The game is not perfect, but the game could also be like so much better. But the expansion, however, I put this expansion, honestly, like, okay, so like I love the MSQ, so obviously like I want to take that out of the equation because the MSQ thing is like so subjective. It's like really difficult to actually figure out like whatever that it is. So at least in that mindset, like for me, I like to think about everything else that kind of encompasses the game's expansion so far. So I've completed every content except for like Fork Tower. But I do understand the issues that people had with Fork Tower, and obviously that's going to address its feedback, and it's going to be looked into hopefully for the future content. But everything else I kind of just I have like an idea of because I've done it. So I put the expansion actually at like a 9.5, which sounds kind of crazy, but like I mean, there's only 2 issues that I had outside of the MSQ, which is I'm giving credibility to Fork Tower's instance queuing system. I know that it's not people's favorite, and so therefore I will let that be kind of like a factor that comes into play with it. Occult Crescent also, they did add like a new functionality to the way how you do the pots fate, which is cool. So at least there's like a bit of a grind to it, which I like too. But also you feel rewarded for it. And then also like the Futures Rewritten Ultimate, granted the fight is fun and I like the fight. It's not my favorite fight. And I think out of the 6 ultimates that we currently have in the game, it is like the worst one. But that's because of the cinematic, I think the storytelling was just a very different direction than what I thought. And so that's why I bring it down like a tiny notch down as well. Otherwise though, the intention of Dawn Trail has actually been fulfilling its promise in terms of like what it was supposed to be doing, right? Delivering content that's supposed to be like fun and engaging and exciting, and also like new content, and also changing up ideas and in preparation for what is going to be 8.0, which I think is great. But I think that nobody really focuses on some of those details. I think people are really like, it's either story or nothing, which again, I get. So there's that. However, I think that there's still like a lot of other issues that are being thought about outside of things like MSQ and expansions in order to actually facilitate the procedure and people wanting to actually play and enjoy the game every single day. Because the simple answer is that you pay for your sub, you get 30 days of a sub, and so therefore you want to say, play the game for 30 days every single day of those days, which makes total sense. So like you don't want to like pay for a sub and then like not be logged in, right? Everyone wants to be logged in and at all times, and that makes total sense. And so I think that there's a lot of things that need to be thought about. And so going back to these 6 ideas that I kind of discussed earlier, here are some of the ideas that I've heard from people that they want that just would be very helpful in terms of like the process of the game's functionality, and hopefully can be something that brings people back into the game as well. The first idea is the content. Now, obviously, Yoshipi's already gone on record for saying that he wants to, change the formula in how they deliver content, because even patches are usually like the hardcore patch, and then odd patches are like the casual patch, sorta. Right, because we get the raid tier 0 to 4, we get the relic stuff like 1 through 5, and like maybe like 4, we get the field operation like 1 through 5, we get like the the something with crafting and gathering like 1 through 5, right? And so I mean, the ultimate's also usually either 1, 3, or 5, which we now know for Dawn Trails it's 1 and 5. But still, like, it's happening, it's giving something for players to do at the hardcore level while still there being more content for the casuals. And so they're changing this now, where they're going to try and build content that's going to be available, right? But it's going to appeal to both sides and kind of cover the entire scope, which I think is a good thing. So I mean, like, we'll have to wait and see. But obviously we've been waiting already for what is like 5 or so days, and people are already like, okay, cool, patch is done, now I gotta wait until 3.31 until I get back in there and do some of the Fiona Moon stuff. But then once I'm done with that, I'm off until 0.35, and then the deep dungeon comes out, and then I'm off until 0.4, right? People still want to fill those gaps between all the issues, and that's what the content's supposed to be there for. Now, that being said, if you are a newer player, then you still have a ton of content to do, and the only thing you can do is gauge the interest and go tackle that content, right? So if you're like a new raider and you want to try and get into the savage raid tiers, you could do that. Or if you want to try and get to some ultimates, you could do that. Or even like Criterion dungeons, or like chaotic alliance raids, deep dungeon solo, like that kind of thing. If you are casual, then obviously like you want to level up into the tribal society quest lines. You want to try and level up your stuff, figure out how to make some guild, tackle like some relics, do some leveling, a whole spiel, right? And so this all makes sense. However, it's still not enough, unfortunately, and I understand that too. And we've asked people like, hey, like, what do you want content wise? If you get like a content thing, like, what is it you need? The answer is actually it's simple, right? It's just content. But like, what kind of content, right? That's a hard question. Now, in my mind, I think that there's a lot of things that we have already in the game that function very well as they can function, but at the same time, the importance of that content doesn't really drive people to like go do it, right? So I'm talking about like the fate system. People really don't have any reason to do fates unless you want to just fulfill like the check mark of the shared fates criteria, and then unlock the vendors, and then go get like the fancy umbrella or like the plates, which again, decent incentive, but not good enough to keep people actually like interested in doing fates. Because once you get it out of the way, like, it's out of the way, and then you don't have to do it anymore, right? So if there was a way to keep on pushing people to doing fates, because the gemstone vouchers are not the move, especially because you can just buy them, right? Fates become a little bit like irrelevant. And I think additionally, there's a lot of expansions worth of content that you're required to go through in order to even like reach Dawn Trail. So, content from Endwalker, Shadowbringer, Stormblood, Heaven's Word of Realm Reborn, it exists. But like, aside from dailies, there's no reason to do and go back and do any of that. And I think that could also turn into content, right? And also, like, people have other questions, right? It's like, okay, well, we have an Unreal Trial, where's the Unreal Raid? We have frontline PvP, where's like my daily for Rival Wings? Things like this. And again, this is just content that keeps people kind of like glued to the idea of wanting to like take on the content. And so I think that that should be their priority number one, is to just use all this mountain of content that they have in order to just give people a reason to go do stuff. People are bored and they want to log in and not just sit in their FCs and type away, right? People want to do stuff, and I totally get that. So that's the first issue. Second issue is weirdly, I mean it's not weird, but it makes sense, honestly, is like just glamour and housing and whatnot, you know what I mean? So glam is obviously like the true end game, and usually glam is something that you could sit and tinker with until you find an outfit that like works for you, And I think what I'm understanding is, from the player base's perspective, the content where you're able to acquire pieces of gear glam wise is it all comes from like a similar place, or it's just like too easy to get, where again, like you go to the market board and then you can just acquire it, and then like if you can schlep out like a million gil, like you can just go to the market board and buy it. Or if you buy like the cloth material, you can go find a friend and be like, hey, can you make this for me? And then like boom, you automatically have like the dress that everyone's been going crazy over, me included, from the map system, right? So there's that as well. But realistically, there's ways to acquire things in this game that don't actually require you to go in and do the content. But people like glam, so it's like, you'll take whatever means necessary to acquire said outfits, and I understand that too. So I think realistically, glam, granted, there's a lot of it. There's still a wide net of things that are being pulled into the game glam wise, but there's still missing pieces that people just really wish that they can like acquire in some way, shape, and form. So the true answer is that, like, if the glam can look good and be acquired by doing like a thing, then again, you're gonna drive people to go like take on that content. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing is the content of actual difficulty. People are kind of understanding with the course of Dawn Trail that the battle difficulties actually kind of had like an increase. However, what's cool is that there's still like a drive for people to take on the challenge, which I do appreciate it like a lot. But also the game is going through this moment where their primary focus is specifically to work on the battle content that comes from the boss fights, right? We have like this 2-minute meta thing that people have been kind of like, oh, like it makes sense that they make this a thing in Shadowbringers, but then they started kind of getting more and more strict about how they operate it. And so therefore we have like this blurred line of how every single job kind of plays like the same, right? Which again, people are wanting to establish an identity with the jobs that they play, and that makes total sense. But it's kind of hard to do that in roles and with certain jobs where like the issue of the actual job itself becomes a problem because of the content you're doing. So for example, people would love to get their hands on playing like Pictomancer and Viper, which makes total sense. However, it feels incredible to play at level 100 because you get to go Super Saiyan Blue mode and go crazy, but then at level 70, it's kind of like take like a freaking nap, you know what I mean? So like the job has a way of how it operates at certain levels as well, and that apparently is happening to a lot of jobs, where people feel like the job's identity isn't fully established at level 100. So if it can be established at 100, then that's great. But how do you give the job some kind of a feeling and identity at like prior levels? Because when you do things like dailies where it's taking on like a level 20 trial or like a level 70 dungeon, it's like, how do you feel good playing the job even at those levels, which I think that they can look into as well. I've talked about this before as well, honestly, and to use like Viper and Reaper as a prime example, right? Like the twins that you have as like a follow-up button with the hunters and the Swiftkin attacks, like you don't get those follow-up buttons, and that's like the primary thing that makes Reaper or Viper so like fun to play, is you press that hunters button and then you do like the double hit thing, and then you do the other version and you do it again. You don't get that till 72, so you can't even use it in any content prior to 72, which again, like, that's Shadowbringers content, so like from Stormblade and prior content is the buttons don't get used in any kind of fancy way. And Reaper, like, kind of the same thing, right? Like you get like your Reaper and Shroud mode at level 80 specifically, but prior to that you ain't got anything, but again, those jobs are newer, so I can understand that making them is like a little bit trickier, but at the same time, just the job content is not really the same thing as the battle content, because some of those, the other issue too is that, like, with the battle content, the difficulties only coming from either ultimates, savage trials that are synced, or if it's level 100 content. Anything from like level 99 and prior, people consider to be like just like too easy, that they're kind of like, oh, like it's just this trial, who cares, right? Now again, I think that it's important that every content in the game just allocates a difficulty that makes you feel like you're working towards something. And I think that's the drive that like people look forward to. However, when you are a level 15 tank and then you have level 7 gear, and then you pull everything in like Sestasha, and then your healer is playing Scholar, and then you just don't have to heal the person because the fairy does the job for you, It kind of feels like you're doing like nothing impactful, you know. So I think that feeling that impact is what people look for it as well. But to only get it within like a Savage Raid or an Ultimate doesn't really feel fair, or even like an Extreme Trial, right? However, even older Ultimates and Savage Raids and Extreme Trials, you don't feel that impact either, because it's like, oh yeah, this fight is old, therefore it's easy. And that philosophy that's been created by the player base kind of has to be like checked in a way, I think. That's the third idea. And again, this is all just stemming back to the game's decline and kind of what people are thinking and feeling about how they feel about the game. The fourth piece, and this is the one that I think is actually the most important, in terms of like the profiteering that could come from Square Enix if they were thinking like business people, because I don't really think that this is what it is, because a lot of people like complain about this issue like a lot, and I totally get it. But it's the online store. Now, again, the online store is like an optional thing, right? It's not required. But here's the problem with the online store. The game is currently under the impression that you're only supposed to have one character. Having an alt is like unnecessary, but it doesn't make sense why the mounts are account wide, but Glamour isn't. That's the first problem. So if they made Glamour account wide, then people would obviously put in effort to, you know, buying the outfit once, and then like if you're like me with 30 characters, then every single character has the outfit and you don't gotta buy it multiplicatively, which would be great for my wallet. However, they don't have that, right? But the mount though, like, hey, yeah, let me buy the new Shag Cat mount, and then, you know, when you split the profiteer between like the one purchase of $24 across 30 characters, I pay less than $1 for each character, which feels really nice. Now that, so realistically, what would be great is if they made the everything account wide, because there's no reason for it to be single character based, which again, I understand. The other issue is, and this is actually the more critical one, is sometimes when you see an outfit set and you're like, oh my gosh, like I love that new like the street jacket attire. You know how it's got the jean jacket with the crop top, the pants, the shoes, you know, and then the other, like the vest piece, right? You got to pay like $24 to buy it one time on one character, and then that's it. And you're like, cool. I spent $24 just for the jean jacket. Like, I just wanted that singular chest piece. I didn't want the whole thing. And that doesn't make people happy, because obviously spending $20 on a thing in a game that you can just acquire, you know, in the game somehow, like elsewhere or something of that nature, right? Doesn't appeal. So the answer to that solution is they need to just start selling everything individually as like an item. So if I want the street jacket attire, if I just want the jacket itself, then I can do that. You know, instead of paying $24 for the whole set, I can pay like, I don't know, how many items are there, like 6 or 7? So I can pay like $6 or $7 for just a singular item, and at least they're getting $6 or $7 from me instead of 0 or 24, right? But if you want to sell the whole thing as like a package with like a discount, then at least you can offer that as like an incentive too. So it's like, hey, you can either spend each piece for like $7, which if you buy individual ones, since it's like $7 a piece, it's like $28. Now we got tax as well and NA. Or you can buy the whole thing for $24 and then save yourself like a little bit of a bargain kind of thing, you know what I mean? But that's the thing that I think that the team is just not taking into consideration. They're selling you the whole thing by like a set, and like I guarantee you that every single set that they offer in the game, there's only one piece of gear that people want most importantly out of that whole set. Like the easiest example for me is like the fairy tale attire set. It's like this gigantic dress that I'll never wear, but it's got these like sleeves that are very like sleek and very pretty, and I'm like, yo, I want those. So I want those, but the piece that I really want are like the heels, because my character is female, so I want the heels. But I gotta pay $18 to pay for 2 pieces, where I could have paid like, I don't know, like maybe like $12 for just the 2 pieces that I wanted, because I didn't want the tiara or the dress, right? So you can take those 2 out of my shopping cart, but just give me the gloves and the shoes. I would have actually just been good with like just the shoes. Now here's the thing though, because of how the dye system works in the game, maybe I could have been convinced to buy the shoes like 3 times, because then I can buy it like in pure white, pure black, right? Boom, and then I get like a fancy dye, like a metallic red or something, and then the 4th one I can like play around with. Now in that kind of idea, instead of paying the set one time and having to dye it one time and pay $24, I could have paid $24 for 4 pairs of shoes, which like I do anyways. But then they would have actually profited from me more so because I would have wanted to do that. You know what I mean? And if they were account wide, then it's like, you know what I mean? So that's how my thought process works, at least when it comes to the dye system, as well as like the online store. The online store is just not being it's not being utilized in any kind of way that allows people to individually, because the number one item that you purchase in the online store, it's always a Fantasia. And what's crazy is that they've given us a Fantasia every single patch since the release of Dawn Trail, and Fantasia is still number one. Like that's kind of insane. Additionally, and I'm gonna borrow this idea from somebody who is well known in the community. This game is on the older side in terms of the engine, the engineering, the coding, the whatever, but the visual display of how things look like have been the same for years and years when it comes to job stuff. But however, I will say though, I think because of the engine, that's a problem at the same time. So what I'm going to use as an example is, I love the job Dragoon. Dragoon is like my favorite melee to play, period. Like no questions asked. But because my character is female, when I have like my stance, right, I grab like my spear on the side, and I have like my feet kind of like crossed and my hand on my hip, and I look like I'm ready to like kind of chill, you know what I mean? But when I play like a male character, then I have the spear like down, and I got like that like traditional Dragoon pose, you know what I mean? Which I'm like, that pose is godlike, but you know what the problem is? I can't wear that pose as a female because, reasons. So like, now here's the thing, it should just be a quality of life that you can switch between the poses regardless of your gender, because like, why the heck not? However, if they were like, hey, if you want to unlock that pose for like your female character, then you got to pay like 5 American USD, or you got to spend like 5 million gil to talk to like a person. Yo, guess what? I would on the spot purchase, like no questions asked. But however, I'm just saying, like, if they did that though, that at least that like leads to some kind of profiting. Or let's say, for example, like I'm gonna use again the example, I'm gonna take the Dark Knight. Dark Knight has this stance where, come here, Timmy, you take the spear, or the sword rather, the giant greatsword, and you're like running forward. You know what I mean? So you run forward and like, and then like same thing. When you have to put your idle stance on with like your male pose, you like do like the cloud stance where you got the sword in the back and you're just chilling. But when you're a female, you put the sword in the ground and then you're just kind of like hanging, and you're like, all right, cool, I got like a sword. And then you sit there. Some men want the other pose where they put the sword in the ground, and other women characters want the sword behind the back sort of thing. So like realistically, the fact that it's not an option is like a little bit of a concern. But again, if they put that in the online store, like you might find somebody who's convinced just enough to buy that just for the sake of a posing thing. Or if I can get like a new animation with the Dark Knight sword, instead of like running forward with it, if I can put it on like my back and like run, like giant sword on my back, and they were like, yo, $5, yo, listen, take take $5, I'm cool with that. Or if I put the sword like, on my like on the side and I'm running, it's like dragging across the floor, but I'm over here kind of like running. Guess what? I'd pay $5 for that stance too. Like easy pocket money. So there's that. So animations is something that I think that, we have emotes, which is great. The emote thing is cool. I like emotes as well, but they're also putting emotes in the game, which I think is also like really, really cool. Like, don't get me wrong. So I'm just saying though, that like, if there was a way to do like a thing that you could, again, like profiteer off of in a small sense, I think that people would be like super down for it. And again, all this still stems from the online store. Because again, if something is really cool and you want to throw your wallet at it, then it's a big profit. Because again, a lot of gacha games are still doing that thing, even still to this day. But what they're doing is giving you really, really cool stuff, not stuff that looks like that it could be in game. If the game thing looks like it shouldn't be in the game, but it's in an online optional store, I think that's what's going to generate the appeal to get people to want to buy it, because it's very atypical to purchase. And I think the new cat mount is like a prime example of that. That cat makes like no sense to be in the game. But guess what? People are buying it like crazy because like it's a giant cat and it freaking has stretchies and it's super cute, and like I want it, but like I digress. Now, here's the other thing that for me is like a massive shocker that isn't in the game or anywhere for that matter, and it's the weapons of this game. The fact that the online store doesn't have weapons to purchase for just every single job, it's like a set coffer thing, is like really insane to me. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't weapons in the online store, because there totally are, but like the themes that are tied to those weapons are kind of like, who cares? Because the scroll page of weapons in the online store are, you don't even get to press like the show more button. There's nothing. So like when you go down the list, you got all the 13 weapons. Then you have like that one random greatsword that they brought back in Shadowbringers that people were kind of like, this sword's ugly. However, it was an event thing. We never saw it again. Then they have the like stuff from the Heavensward with the Knights, for example. They gave us the Palace of the Dead set, right? And then we got Y'shtola's weapon. We got like Gaia's weapon for like various jobs. And then we just recently got what is it, Grahatia's like scepter and cane for White Mage and Black Mage, and then we just got Zero's weapon, and like that's it. So they're, all the weapons really come from like a role thing with a theme of a character in mind, not just like random made up weapons. I'm heavily so shocked that they just don't take random weapons and put like a glow effect on it and then just throw it on the online store. Now, like I said, are people going to want to pay for that? Not necessarily. However, if it was in the online store and it was shiny and cool and people were like, oh my god, I want it, you best believe people would actually put some effort out of their day to like go buy it. And again, it doesn't have to be any theme whatsoever. They could just have like a blue, like a red weapon set, and it's just a red sword for like a paladin, and it just glows like a very bright and vivid red. And guess what? You just, you know, you could automatically just have it. And again, $5 in the online store, all of a sudden this kind of starts to like pile up a little bit. So anyways, the online store is heavily underutilized in terms of what they could produce and how they actually produce stuff. And again, I'm not advocating for any way in how they create that content, but the faster that they utilize the way that you can pump out on that online store, you'd be shocked that you can make like a fortune off of on the store itself, which again is like wild, because people would pay for a lot of money just to be able to like do a thing in the game, account wide or not. It's just a matter of that. That was the fourth point. The fifth point is a lot more leaning towards the progressive system in the game. Everyone notoriously will never admit it, or maybe they don't care, or maybe it is what it is, but everyone's got an alt. Simply put, everyone has an alt. And so there's no reason in the game right now to have an alt, unless you're doing a thing where you have like European friends, but you're in America and you got to go play with like European friends. So what you got to do is make an alt. But the actual functionality of the characters between two characters in this game are insignificant, and also they don't even exist. There's a big wall that splits away between why would you have a character on Ether and Crystal? Like, there's no reason, right? You can have a character on one or the other, and now you can just travel between the two servers, because it made sense back in the day. You had alts because you couldn't server transfer by any means. So like if you wanted to raid on Ether because it's just the most populated server to raid on, like World Center-wise, like you would just do that. But like, let's say like all your best friends are from like Primal, so you get to have a character on Primal in order to hang out with your homies. But if you wanted to raid, you get to raid with on Ether, right? Because right now we're in that situation where, you know, there's 4 data centers on NA, and nobody can raid with each other across those data centers unless you're all on the same server. So everyone goes to Ether for that purpose alone. Now, I think that because now that we can server transfer, I don't know when they're planning on doing like an NA party finder thing where you can be on any DC and server, it doesn't matter. You can just all hit one PF. You know, that would be really cool. But the more important thing is like the duty finder, because what's really troubling is like Dynamis is currently in that position where people are putting up a party finder thing to go do trials, such as like Ifrit Hard or like Titania Normal. Like those trials almost instant queue if you're playing like a tank or like a healer on Ether or even like Primal. But even like Crystal and Primal are running into that problem where certain things that take maybe 20 minutes to fill in take like 3 seconds on Ether. So I genuinely think that if you just combine all of them under one umbrella in terms of the queuing system, then like chances are DPS in need becomes more populated than like a tank or like a healer thing, you know. So again, I think that being able to queue into content is problematic in terms of the server situation. And again, I will take a quality of life thing any day of the week if they make it work like properly than having to acquire like new content, like for sure, you know. So that's point number 5. And as for the last point, I think this one is kind of like a, you know, a feels how you want to kind of thing. But again, like this game is designed heavily around doing content, right? But sometimes there's just content that people just like don't want to do, and I understand that too. So you got to be able to create content that is like involving you not doing content, right? Which again is, it's weird, but it kind of makes sense, right? Because again, like people AFK and go to only like Limsa, Old Dog, Redania, or they sit in like Tula Yolal to do like whatever. And I understand that. However, people also have to find a purpose to go out and explore the world, or understand like why there's a side quest to do, for the example, right? There's all this massive areas to go check out and do stuff, but the game doesn't really give you any reason or incentivization to go explore it unless you go explore it for the first time ever due to the MSQ thing. So like, for me, it's really sad to see areas like Kugane is like my favorite city and it's empty, right? There's no reason to go to Kugane of any kind for like a Stormblood city. Like no one cares, right? And same thing with like Shadowbringers Endwalker now, because Endwalker is officially old expansion. So Charlian and Razed Han are just a barren wasteland of a town. It just sits there and doesn't do anything. The only reason why you go back there is because either one, you're going through the MSQ, or two, you just cleared DSR or top and you got to go collect the shiny totem, and that's all that there is. Or you gotta do relics. I guess that's another reason too. Right? So unfortunately, just the reason behind the world's exploration and expansions, like the world's getting larger and larger with time, but the actual fulfillment of going through those towns and areas is just completely lackluster. So the game has a lot of that going around, but it's happening everywhere. So realistically, if there was a method to give people purpose to just want to sit and chill in those areas, regardless of where you are and what you're doing, again, like it'd be like a lot of help. But the game has a huge instancing system, so that way you don't have to ever do any of that. Once you unlock the dungeon, you never have to go to that spot again to like do the dungeon thing. Now I'm actually okay with that, but I think that if they turn like a non-content thing into a thing that allows me to go do stuff in other areas, then that'd be really cool. But I think that they have to do that with either like the hunt system, which we kind of already have because people still do hunt trains to this day, which is really cool, and S-rank farming, still really cool. But a lot of other games do things that give a lot of drive and purpose to the world, and people are learning this now because they're taking a break from 14 because there's no content to do, and they're playing other MMOs. Like I've already played this game like several months ago, but it's currently making like a big surge in Guild Wars 2. People are going to Guild Wars 2, and listen, they're loving it because like there's just stuff to do no matter where you are. People are in like the Realm Reborn expansion of Guild Wars 2, and there's just no reason to do MSQ in that game because there's so much stuff to do in the world, you know what I mean? And so I think that that's something that's appealing to a lot of players. And I had my own opportunity to play Guild Wars 2 like at the very beginning of the summer prior to the patch of 2.5 coming out, or 0.25 rather. And then I was like, you know what, this system that they have in Guild Wars 2, I don't really care anymore if ideas get stolen from one game to another, but man, they gotta input the system in 14, and then they can fix a lot of things that like appeals to the people, or something of the nature, right? I'm talking about like the world's event system, at least as like an example. So there are a lot of things that this game could benefit from dramatically that they can take from other games, which again, like the only reason why we want that to be a thing is just so that the game can become a better version of its already current self. We're already waiting to hear about the news that comes out between patches 0.4 and 0.5 into the inevitable 8.0, where supposedly we're going to get like a whole job rework system for every job, and they're going to kind of go back to how it was prior to Endwalker Shadowbringers. But we don't actually know until we actually see it for ourselves, right? So we have to wait until that happens. But the wait time for that is like a literal year. So you got to try to fill the gap between now and then to have us be appealed to that game idea going into 8.0. Now here's the thing though, I'm a diehard 14 player, so I'm still gonna play the game almost every single day, if not every single day. I have been for the past like 10 years, so like GG's on that situation. Right, so I'm looking forward. I'm really hopeful for what awaits in 14, but I understand that like a lot of people don't think and act like how I do. Right, there's not like a constant drive and need to log in every single day and like do content. You know, I like to do it because like again, I love this game, of course. But I also understand now that being able to make time for this game is as important as this make time for other games, you know. But I don't want people to think that me taking a break away from the game means that like, uh-oh, like Session's not playing 14 anymore, the game is cooked. It's like, no, it's like, yeah, the game has content for me when I want to do it, and the thing is that I always want to do content. However, I understand also that a lot of people also run into the problem where listen, like the market moves quick, and so waiting 4 months for a new patch is not terrible, but like sometimes I ask the very simple question of like, hey, like if we get like a 7.0 patch and then we get 7.01, why do they skip 5? Oh, it's a 5. Like where's my 2, 3, and 4? You know what I mean? Like even that to me, I'm like, you know, if like even from like a brain perspective, if you tell me like, yeah, there's a new piece of content that comes out like every month or whatever for like 7.31, 0.32, 0.33, 0.34, and then 0.35, like that at least lets me understand like, okay, they have stuff like divvied up between being able to like tackle on the content, because you know, at least there's like something to do. Because I think that a lot of people, you know, right now there's this current situation, I mean it's been this way for like a long time, but people are kind of like being a lot more mindful of it, is like whenever new content comes out, the objective is to just get it out of the way ASAP. But only certain players do that, right? Not everybody, because sometimes you take your sweet time and enjoying it. Like me, I'm not like a world first racer in the world of ultimates and savage raids and eventually the quantum legend stuff, right? Like the quantum stuff is going to come out, and then again, people are going to try and figure that out on day 1. Meanwhile, that content's meant to be like slowly seasoned and played by the player base, like slowly and surely. But because like world first racers are going to complete it in under 24 hours, therefore I must be able to complete it in 24 hours or else I'm like behind, right? That doesn't really make sense. So the idea at least would be to just, and again, like the content should come out in patches and cycles that in a way that allow people to slowly enjoy it. And that way people are busy long enough that like they could content. Because again, like doing things on a weekly basis is great if there's a reason to do it every single week, not just doing it like the one time, right? So, and that goes for ultimates and savage raids, for casual content like you know, alliance raids, and like even exchange trials, and you know, and all this stuff. And on the bright side, they've created a weekly system, but they really gotta like, for lack of a better word, they gotta like abuse how many weeklies there are. I think like if there's currently, for example, like 50 weeklies, yo, make like 250 weeklies. Make it like almost impossible to tackle every single weekly in a week, because at least you just fill it up with enough opportunities and different ideas that people can like tackle like literally anything and just kind of like just be busy. People want to be busy playing 14, and right now there's just not enough like busyness. So that's my thought process, at least. All of this over the decline of the financial reports for 14. Long conversation, but I think I speak for a lot of folks that one of those 6 points, it's like a, oh my god, like this is so true situation, you know what I mean? And again, this is not me saying this because of what I think, this is what I'm saying out loud based on what people have told me. So again, it's like a whole conversation. But that being said though, you know, people are going to doom and gloom about the post of this game, not because of any particular reason, but more so just because like people want the game to succeed, and they want to be you know, they want a reason to play the game, and I feel that actually. I'm in the same mindset. But I thankfully have a wonderful community of people that I meet and people that meet me, and we just find fun to have, you know. But I want people to also find that fun that we can find. Whether it be the challenging thing or the contenting thing, or like the, you know, crafting or the gathering thing, whatever that it is, you know, or the online store thing, the glam farm. Listen, farm glamming is endgame. We know this. So hopefully there's a reason that people find a drive to do it themselves as well. So, you know. Anyways, I think that realistically, the game for this quarter not looking appealing to the people, at least. But again, this number is also from the first quarter. That was a while ago already. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens in the future. But there you have it. Fingers crossed. 8.0 on the far horizon, but at least it's still on the horizon. You know what I mean? So as long as we continue to support the game for what it's worth, hopefully they can hear. They should just talk to somebody that they like. You know what I mean? Just talk to people that something, because sometimes like the people that make the game don't play the game. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping that they find somebody to talk to that they're like, hey, like, yo, what do we need in the game? And it's like, you need to do this, 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 and this. It's going to imply the idea that the developers are washed, but like no, maybe they're just not understanding like what the people want. You know, that's a whole. We got the forums for that. We don't know though. So, anyways, I'm gonna go get some pizza. Thank you for watching and tuning in, and let me know what you think. You know, peace.